Welcome to Return on Intuition, the podcast where strategy meets soul. I'm Erin McMahon, a marketing leader, startup advisor, mom of two, and lifelong seeker of what's real. In a world ruled by data, speed, and artificial intelligence, there is a space where we pause to tune in. Each week, we'll explore what it means to lead, build, parent, and grow, not just with logic, but with intuition. You'll hear from founders, creators, marketers, spiritual guides, and so many more. People aligning ambition with purpose and using their intuition as a real tool for transformation. Because when we pay attention, get present, and trust our instincts, that's when the magic happens. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome to Return on Intuition, where we explore the intersection of behavioral science, spirituality, decision-making, and a deeper intelligence that guides us in work and life. I'm Erin McMahon, a marketing leader, mother, and insatiable, curious observer of what drives human behavior. So today I want to talk about one of the first ways I got into behavioral economics and behavioral science, and one of my favorite experiments that really sparked my interest. So first time I heard of behavioral economics was I was working in Boston at the time, and I would walk through the Boston T, or it was actually Cambridge, walk through the MIT bookstore in the winter from the train station to get to my office. And I worked at Google at the time. And so, of course, walking through a bookstore, I see a lot of key books on display that are new. And the book that caught my interest at the time was Predictably Irrational, which I think is probably one of my favorite books of all time. But then I would also say that the title is amazing and eye-catching. So I bought it and I read it. And it is by Dan Ariely, and he talks about behavioral economics, which the premise of it is that although the normal premise of economics is that humans are rational beings and act according to, their best interests and in predictable ways, that that really isn't true. And there are elements of psychology and behavioral science that can really help us how humans do behave. And they do behave in ways that are irrational, but it's also predictable and understandable. So I love that. It's part of why I love marketing and just understanding psychology and human behavior. So one key part of this book, or one key experiment in this book, was called the invisible gorilla experiment. I had never heard of this before, and so I immediately looked it up, and I couldn't believe what I saw. The premise is simple. You're asked to watch a video of people passing basketballs, and your task is to count how many passes one particular team. So focused on this task, many viewers, count 18, 20, and quite often this happens in a group setting. So they're trying to make sure that they are accurate counters and they see it as others do. But the catch of the experiment is, in the middle of the video, a person in a gorilla suit walks in and beats his chest and then walks out right in front of the eyes of the viewer. And surprisingly, most people don't catch this, or a lot of people don't catch it. Now, unfortunately, I've ruined this a little bit in terms of you already know the catch of the video, and if you see the number of passes, if you're alerted to the gorilla and anticipate it, then you probably will spot it. But you can still try it on friends and family, and I would, because I have, and it is interesting to see who picks up on the surprise in the video. So the point of this experiment is that if people are focused on a task, then they may not and probably will miss key things that are happening. This is about selective attention, how our brain filters what we think is important and tunes out everything else. This is key for intuition, and it is, debatable about whether this, is a knock on intuition or enhances intuition. And Predictably Irrational, Dan Ariely tells us that this means that we can't necessarily trust our intuition because we are not seeing everything. My take on it is a little bit different. I think that if we are given a task and focus solely on that task, and that's our general mentality, then yes, we will miss things. However, what this experiment shows us is that if we widen the aperture and we are aware that we're not aware of everything, then we can potentially pick up on more signals that we wouldn't necessarily see if we just focused on our task-oriented and logical thinking. So I think that in general, our practices of intuition, our practices of mindfulness, being present in the moment can help open us up to more. So what we pay attention to and the way we pay attention to things. So our intuition isn't necessarily deceptive, and also picking up on things that aren't necessarily part of the task. So, in the last episode, we talked about ignoring things that aren't necessarily logical and don't make sense. I think this is an extension of that, in that if you're tasked with, doing something like, creating a short-term, blog post or campaign explaining a particular product feature, and it's very like quickly executable task that the engineering team has asked you to do. Think about the larger picture and think about whether your brain or intuition is telling you, can you make this something larger? Or is there a different spin that you can put on this that makes your product or what you're talking about stand out in the crowd? Our brains are wired for efficiency. So they are assigned a task, focus on doing that task, doing it with the lowest energy usage. So if we're used to doing something and executing, getting it done, then that's what we'll focus on. The reticular activating system, which is a bundle of nerves at the base of our brain, acts like a filter, tuning in what we've deemed as important and tuning out the rest. This is really interesting, and I wasn't aware of this until I, investigated the invisible gorilla experiment and really dove into it more deeply. But it is true that we filter out a lot of what we see. So what we see is not, and what we take in is not truly reality, which is mind-blowing. But it means that we can use it to our advantage in terms of using our internal self and our feelings and internal guidance to focus and to look for things that we want to. An example of this that has been used countless times is if you are considering buying a certain type of car, you wouldn't necessarily have seen that car on the street that much, but then all of a sudden you see the car much more in parking lots and things like that. And it's not because all of a sudden, everybody is driving, Toyota Priuses. It's because you're considering that car and now you see it. So the reticular activating system acts like a filter. It's why people in that experiment were so focused on, counting the passes and not necessarily seeing everything else. It's also the reason that we can hear our name called across a noisy room, because we're trained to listen for our name. So this shows up everywhere in the workplace. We're heads down, goal-oriented, but the real insight and game-changing strategy is that we can broaden our perspective and think more creatively and contribute more creatively in an emerging, noisy marketplace. So you can think about this both from how you do your work and the unique take that you have on certain things. And then you can also think about it from the consumer perspective, which is, we are bombarded with many pieces of information, signals, people trying to get our attention based on what role we have in our personal lives, what role we have in the workplace, etc. And how do we as marketers, communicators, innovators get across our message, and how do we break through and or activate what people are focused on? So I think this is key in marketing, because if people are focused on, a certain set of values or a certain set of things they want to get done, then your message needs to connect that in a resonant and meaningful and memorable way. And in life, well, the gorilla might be your child's need for a connection, the moments of joy you miss because you're thinking about the daily tasks that you've been doing. I certainly have this conflict on a daily basis, which is, I have a list of things I get done. We have a routine that we're going through. Got to get the kids through dinner. Got to get them through, their bath, and they might, be crying or have a tantrum. And I'm almost thinking about the possibilities of when I will get, a tantrum, or how much I'll have to convince a kid to get in the bath or things like that. But, what are the things that we're missing that are not associated with the tasks? So I'd be open for suggestions for how to be more present and enjoy those quiet moments, and use those moments of presence to understand what children's needs are, and or make sure that we're listening for things that aren't immediately loud. So, if a child does have a tantrum, one child does and the other child's quiet, what does the other child need? Because the louder one is, is the one that is immediate and is the task at hand. But what are the other considerations? Or what does the tantrum really mean? I've read a lot by Dr. Becky Kennedy, who wrote Good Inside, about how our children's intentions, and really everyone's intentions, are good, but ultimately when we're raising our children, we will see outputs and or behavior that are more frustrating to encounter, such as tantrums, loud emotions, things like that. So, behind what you see, what is the visible, what is the invisible behind that? What does the tantrum really mean? And I think that that's very helpful to look at. What is the tantrum isn't necessarily the problem. It's a signal for something else that your child needs. So I think that's a way to think about what is the task at hand. What is that immediate, this is visible. This is what I need to do, which is, quell the tantrum in the most manageable way possible. But what is that gorilla that I don't necessarily see that's underneath? Is it somewhat, my child looking for more individual attention? Is it the fact that he's dealing with feelings that he doesn't know how to manage yet? Is it the fact that he has something in school that he wants to talk about, but he doesn't know how to express it? So again, thinking about not just the immediate, what's the task at hand, but then what's behind that. Talked about personal life, talked about work a little bit. I want to talk about the world of AI because it is top of mind and part of my work. And I work with companies that are building AI, part of AI infrastructure, and it is certainly part of the news. Where's the gorilla now? AI is, part of a buzzword. Everybody is talking about it, and it honestly is a blanket term that means so many things that it's kind of crazy that we put it all in one word. The news talks about it in terms of productivity, automation, fear, disruption, taking over jobs. But where's the gorilla? What's not being said? So I think about that because there are a lot of unknowns. There are a lot of fears associated with it. But, for you personally in your life, and then for us as society as a whole, what are those things, those hidden elements that aren't being really talked about and that can emerge and hopefully benefit us for the better and help us individually in our careers understand how this will benefit, how it will benefit what we do and also what our kids do and how they learn. So in the case where I work at Aether with AI infrastructure, we're seeing emerging use cases that are really helping how people discover and connect with people. A lot of the news headlines are focused on just ChatGPT, how it's going to overtake people's jobs. But I also see undercurrents of other innovations of, how farmers are using AI to, more efficiently produce crops or more efficiently use water usage where it's unavailable. So I encourage people to dive deeper, both for what it means for you personally. I'm optimistic, so I like to think about the positive ways about how it's going to, different use cases are going to change from using something like ChatGPT instead of Google in your personal life and how you communicate with people, but then also what are these other emerging companies and use cases that aren't necessarily related to, taking jobs away from people, but, related to changing meaningful ways that we work. So we're in a moment that demands both intuition and awareness. The future isn't what is being dictated to us from the news, and it isn't something that we can completely control, but we can harness it and use it to our advantage. And that's based on what we notice and what we create and then what we can build. And that's, a lot of that is looking internally and seeing what signals and guidance you're taking, not using external signals as the main driver, and, moving forward and flourishing that way. So this week, pay attention to what you're not paying attention to and ask yourself, what gorilla might be walking through my office space or my kitchen? Thanks for listening. I'm Erin, and this was Return on Intuition. If this sparked something for you, share it, subscribe, or experiment. And remember, presence is power. See you next time. Thanks so much for tuning in to Return on Intuition. If something sparked your curiosity or lit you up, I'd love to hear from you. Share the episode, leave a review, or DM me with what landed. Your feedback helps shape where we go next. And remember, the best decisions don't just come from what you know, they come from what you feel. So take a breath, trust yourself, and keep following the moments that feel like magic. I'll see you next time.